Hey there, designer friends. Today we have a really inspiring conversation with designer Rachel Hurry. She has built a fantastic and phenomenal six-figure freelancing career while raising her daughter in South Africa against all odds when people told her she couldn't do it. So it's a really fantastic story, and I hope you take a lot from it. Rachel has recently joined us in Flux Academy as a freelancing and web design coach, and she is just doing amazing work. I hope you'll see her a lot more on the channel soon. In the meanwhile, enjoy this conversation. Hey Rachel, what's up? Thank you so much for coming on the channel.
It's such a pleasure
How's
to
it
be
going?
here. I'm excited. Yeah, no, it's going good. Very exciting to be here. It's currently freezing where I am. Yesterday it was 30 degrees, so it's very confusing, but feeling good.
Good. I really wanted to share your story here on the channel because when you first told me your story, I was kind of like blown away. And I think this can be really either inspirational or instructional for a lot of people, the way that you've built your career so far. So let's actually start at the beginning. What was your first kind of like design experience? How did you get into design?
I think that probably starts from the minute I was born, but to be more helpful, I was always creative. I grew up with a pencil in my hand and any surface that could have some sort of color on it, it had color on it, including my mother's passage walls. So I was always very expressive, but it soon dawned on me in high school that I wanted to do more with creativity. I kind of realized I definitely wasn't a fine artist, even though I did fine art. I enjoyed the strategic part of it. I enjoyed being able to translate a brief, the contextualization of the story, and that was kind of, at least I think that's where it started. And that's where my love of solving
But what was your
problems
first
started.
experience?
Then,
What was your first experience like with a brief or something like that?
so that,
Because most people just start off by doing logos for friends and that kind of stuff.
so it was funny. I never, okay, so here's the irony of the story is that I didn't even know design was a thing. And I didn't even know that you see logos, but you don't, if you're not in the industry or you're not exposed to something like that, you don't make the connection. You just see a picture and that's just what it is. But I graduated high school and I knew that I needed to go and study, and I got accepted to a college for brand strategy because I wanted to do more of the thinking part of it. But my gut panicked and I actually rejected the acceptance, and I said, no, I want to work for a year. I want to waitress. I want to get some life underneath me and just take a break. So I waitressed for a year, and that was where it all started. There was a regular client who used to come in all the time, and he was always doing stuff on his computer, and I happened to stroll past one day, and I made a comment on what he was working on, and he said, oh, you seem to have an eye for this, and it spiraled out, and he actually hired me to do my first logo. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what a logo was. I was frantically searching through YouTube and Google trying to figure it out. But I did it. I think I got paid the equivalent of about $50 for it. And that was where it all began. I kind of did little bits and pieces. I didn't do any more logos. I ended up doing menus. So I worked at a couple of restaurants, managed a restaurant for a while, did all their logos, helped them with their social media, did all of that stuff. And it was very organic. I wasn't really thinking about it. And then I applied for a different college, which was a creative business school where they teach you essentially how to get into the industry. And that was where I started answering real briefs. I got a part-time job, so I was working at the same time. And that was kind of, it all just blew up from there.
So let's dive into the restaurant experience. I think that is really, really interesting because you weren't being hired to be a designer, but you kind of like tried to provide more value or be helpful at your job by just saying, hey, I think we can do this better. But how did you know how to do this? How did you learn how to use the software? How did you learn to do menus, like printing stuff? That's even more complex.
I'm really very self-taught. I've always been a bit of a techie. So my dad actually, he brought in some of the first computers into South Africa. And he opened up one of the first educational computer centers at a school in South Africa. And so I had a computer in my house from the early days, back when people didn't really know it was a thing, that you could do other stuff with it besides send an email or, do whatever. But I always was tinkering around, working out how to do stuff, MS Paint, the OG. And I think where it came from is I figured it out. It was one of those things where I went, okay, this needs to happen. So I need to work out how to do it. And I don't remember whether I didn't have design software. So I think I used Microsoft Word. Don't kill me. I did it in Microsoft Word. I think I may have used a bit of PowerPoint, but Microsoft Word it was. And that was kind of where I went. There was a print shop down the road from the restaurant, and I just walked in and I said, hi, I know nothing about paper. Can you tell me what this should be done on? And built a long-term relationship with them as well. Ended up doing all of my college printing with them as well. It was just, I've always just had that kind of mindset. If something needs to be done, figure it out. And I think I knew how to talk a good talk. I don't want to sound like I bullshitted, but I did. I knew how to sell something, and I knew how to say to them, this is why you need to do something like this. And they would say to me, well, can you do it? And I'd say, yes. And then I'd run home and go and work out how to do it. I think I was just brave and ballsy.
Were you getting paid for all of this extra work?
No.
At the restaurant?
No.
Or was this just like, you want to do this, go do it, but...
Yes. So how I got the menus specifically, it was a upmarket cafe, and they were printing their menus on like just plain printer paper, and they were just cutting them out, and it just looked awful. And I just instinctively knew the service industry has always been a passion of mine. I loved my job as a manager and a waitress. I really did. Some people say it's the worst job in the world. It's hard, but I loved it. I loved creating a good experience, and I knew that the menus were just rubbish. They would fold and they would get stained, and it was just not great. It like killed the experience. And so I actually designed them without the boss knowing, went and had them printed, cut. I sourced little boards for them with clips.
You paid for the printing.
And I paid for it all myself. And then I just put them in the restaurant. I just put them there. And then she came in and I handed her a menu and said, what can I get you to drink? And she didn't notice at first, which was super. I was like, oh, oof. But then 5 minutes later, she called me over and she said, what are these? And I said, well, and she said, oh, cool, carry on. There was no thank you. There was no, oh, good job. There was just, cool, carry on. And I was like, okay. So I very quickly learned that don't look for praise. Do something because you care about it, and don't do it because you want something in return. Do it because you care about it. That was that. And also,
I want to state something. I want to state something which seems obvious to me, but I think a lot of people miss it, which is you were working there. So you were familiar with their problems. You were familiar with their customers. You knew how to help them do better business using design. And again, you just did it instead of asking for permission, which I think is just wonderful. So what made you want to go into design school? Yeah.
So I have been racking my brain for the longest time to try and remember where the transition happened in terms of going not art, design. I think I stumbled across the college. It was called Red and Yellow. It's still called Red and Yellow. And back then it was Red and Yellow School of Magic and Logic. And it's not that anymore. They've changed the way they do things now. But when I saw it, I saw this terrible website, red and yellow, and it looked like a preschool website. And I said, this looks ridiculous. This doesn't look like a school that I want to go to. But I visited the campus and I met the head lecturer, and he was a eccentric genius. And he showed me the work of a third-year student in branding. And I went, I'm sold. I want to do that. I want to do that. That's where I want to be. And I took the application forms home. It was like a 3-week application. We had to answer a brief. We had to write a radio ad. We had to illustrate. We had to solve a creative brief for a brand project. I had no idea how to do any of that. I literally spent days trying to figure it out, and then went in person to hand in my application to him, and said, there you go. I'll see you on the other side. Very confident, very cocky, goodness me. But it worked, and they accepted me, and the rest is history. It was the best one.
Was it like a 4-year design school kind of thing? Or
it was 3 years. And I was one of these people who, I don't know if it's the same in other countries, but in South Africa, to do a degree is very prestigious. To do a diploma is somewhat not so. So it was
what is the difference?
So a degree is almost like a bachelor degree. So they call it a bachelor degree, and it's kind of like, you go to bachelor's, and then I think you go to like honors, and then you go to master's, and then you do all of that stuff. But you can get pretty much, you can get pretty far with just a degree. But it's a complete misconception, because actually I know so many people who've got a degree and don't have work, or still figuring it out, or don't understand, they can't go anywhere with that degree. And so I made a decision early on. I said, I'm not interested in a degree. I don't need the piece of paper. I just want a good education that's going to allow me to think properly so that I can do what I want to do, which is my own thing. Didn't know what that looked like. So it was a diploma, which essentially was not considered a good thing at all, and was sort of frowned upon. But I was so excited about it because it was a practical course. So it worked in 3-week cycles, and from second year onwards. So first year was pure like groundwork. They taught you all the basics, and you did like basic activities, and you went through a whole bunch of stuff. But second year, you started answering briefs, and every 3 weeks you got a new brief, and you had to conceptualize, execute, and present in 3 weeks, on and on and on. And it was gruesome, but it was fantastic because you learned quickly. You got fit, you learned how to answer a brief, you learned how to do everything from the strategy to the concept to the execution, printing, development, all of it. We did code, we did full-blown digital skills. They taught us their full Adobe suite from scratch. They taught us marketing. They taught us everything, and we had to combine it into a practical brief. And that was, barring becoming a mother, I got so little sleep, it's actually a joke. I don't know how I coped.
So you became a mother while studying as well?
No. So that happened after. I had a friend who became a mom in second year, and we all like piled together. Her son became the class mascot, and we were all so proud of her. And his name he had a cool name, and he was just the coolest kid, and she was the coolest person. And so that was fun. Mine came after, thankfully.
Got it. And you mentioned you were working while studying. You were also working part-time?
Yes. So I waitressed part-time. I carried on waitressing. And then I also worked for a bunch of different companies here and there, just doing graphic design. And then I met
was it like agencies or studios or something like that?
I think so. It was mostly through relationship. I'd meet someone mostly through my waitressing. Actually, I met the most amazing people and told them what I did. And I had a little portfolio. It wasn't. I think it was just a PDF where I'd like put some stuff in, and the college was great. They were very adamant on building a portfolio. So they had us doing that from the beginning on Behance. So I had that, which I could send them, but I was very terrible at keeping it updated. So don't tell my lecturers, but anyway.
Very common.
Yeah. So I got all that work, and I think in third year, I met a guy who ran a company which is now a very popular company. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're called Over, and they are an app like Canva that do graphics and things like that, and you can build different graphics. When they started, they were based in Cape Town, South Africa, and they had their headquarters there, and I met one of the main guys. We hit it off. We had a great creative conversation, and they hired me to do some of their graphics for them. And that was ongoing. I did that through the whole of third year. And then eventually I had to stop because it was showcase time and I got too busy. So I left that job. But yeah, I was pretty much working 2 or 3 jobs at any given moment, along with my college career.
So what happened after college?
So how it works is at the end of third year, we do a thing called showcase, which is essentially like artists putting on a display of all their best work, and they create a portfolio, a proper portfolio by hand. And I created mine and I actually hand stitched it. And it was like this big, beautiful white book of all my work. And we put on a showcase and all the industry people come and they essentially come and shop. It's a bit like being on display, but and everybody gets all dressed up and there's music and speeches and it's a great time, but it's very stressful because essentially you've got to go back over all 3 years of your work and fix it so that it's ready for showcase. Anyway, we did showcase and that was fantastic. I met a couple of really amazing industry people, but I was always uncomfortable. Not because they were horrible people, but because I didn't want to go into the industry. We'd done internships. I'd worked with a couple of the agencies just as a volunteer, and I just didn't want to be there. I can't put my finger on it. I think it didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I could add the best value. I didn't feel like I was going to be taken seriously, which was unfortunately the truth in many cases. But they tell you you're crazy if you want to go and do your own thing. You have no idea what you're doing. You have no experience, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's going to hire you.
Who is they, by the way? Who is they?
Everybody. So fellow students, parents, not my parents. My parents are entrepreneurs. So they were like, go, go, go. But so I was lucky in that sense. Lecturers, I don't think they meant it in a malicious way. I think it was more a case of going, look, you're young, you know nothing. Don't fall on your face. Go and work at an agency, get some experience, and then start, which, to be fair, probably would have been a good plan. I don't think there's anything wrong with going into the industry. So anyway, I decided, cool, fine, I will do that. So I accepted a job with a small studio that's focused on branding only. And I thought, okay, cool. This way I don't have to do advertising. I can just focus on branding, which is what I was passionate about at the time. And the owner of that studio, had a web development studio that she worked closely with. And I liked them and wanted to kind of peep over their shoulders and see what they were doing because I was interested in web. So that went well. I accepted the job and a month in, found out I was pregnant. So that threw me for
just when you were started.
I'd just gotten started. I was happy. We were doing some really cool work with some really great clients. I'd moved out. I'd moved into a flat with a roommate. Everything was kind of perfect. And then I was like, oh, well, ding dong, as they say. So everything changed after that. My mindset shifted. And I think up until that point, I mean, I always have to actually forget about this, but I worked very hard in college and I actually came first every single year in college. And then I won some award for being like a creative strategic thinker, blah, blah, blah. And everybody told me I'd really do very well in the industry and that, blah, blah, blah. And I got all these interview requests. And I felt, I don't like telling this part of the story because I always feel a bit like a because I didn't want any of it. And I felt uncomfortable with it. And it felt like I was letting everybody down by not going for it and not wanting to climb that ladder and be like a prestigious art director and do all of that stuff. I just didn't want it. And I felt like I'd let people down and I'd taken the spot and not used it. And then when I fell pregnant, I was like, oh my word, I've now gone even further to just completely stuff it up. And it was quite hard for me because I went, well, oh dear, what now? And the irony is that it was exactly what should have happened, because up until that point I'd been hiding and I'd been pretending like I just wanted to be a graphic designer. I just wanted to sit quietly in a corner and do my thing and go home at the end of every day, and it was okay, and I was happy with this much money, and I was happy. I wasn't, but I didn't give myself permission to want it. And falling pregnant with my daughter woke me up. And I went, okay, it's time. So I think I handed in my resignation the next week and said to her, I'm happy to stay for the next 4 to 5 months, but then I'm going. And unfortunately, because of the situation, I think she was quite disappointed because she just hired me, and here I am sitting and saying, well, I'm going to leave now. And I think it was quite stressful for her. And so she took it well, but also not well. It was like a bit of an awkward situation. I think she thought I was lying, that I didn't know about it when I was applying for the job, but I didn't. It's fine. So I think she thought I was lying. But anyway, so that put a bit of a rift in our relationship. So working there was hard. And that was a hard time. I learned a lot of valuable lessons. I worked long hours and I didn't know what to do. I knew that it wasn't going to be this. And
what was your plan? What were you thinking?
I didn't have one. And I went.
So why did you quit? Like, why?
Because I went, if I'm going to be, it was literally, I remember I was sitting outside and I was looking up at the wonderful Cape Town Table Mountain because I could see it from my flat. And it was quite an iconic moment, like from the movies kind of thing. And I literally was sitting there looking at the mountain. I suddenly went, if I'm going to be a good mom, my daughter needs to see me making brave decisions about my happiness. And I'm not happy in this job. So I'm going to quit and then I'll figure it out. And like I always have, I will figure this out too. And I did. I think I came home one evening from work and it was like 7 o'clock at night. I'd worked overtime. I was exhausted. I'd had to go grocery shopping. I dropped the groceries. It was just one of those days when everything had gone wrong. And I sat down at the table in tears, feeling very sorry for myself. And I suddenly went, that's enough. That's enough. Build a business. Build it. Do it. Shut up and do it. So I was like, okay, all right.
But building a business and going out on your own is overwhelming as it is. And I can imagine being pregnant, you're tired, you're stressed, after you're going to give birth, you're going to have way more work on your hand. Like,
I was very naive.
The steps? Like,
I didn't know how much work was coming. So I had no idea. But so what happened is I went, okay, how am I going to do this? And I sat down at my computer and I remember jumping onto Instagram and looking for graphic designers, and I just started following all of them. Following anybody who was doing anything creative that looked like they were doing it by themselves. And I particularly looked overseas because I knew that South Africa wasn't the best place to look. It was very taboo being a freelancer. You definitely don't get taken seriously as one. So I knew I couldn't be a freelancer, or I didn't want to be, at least. I stumbled across a girl who ran a studio, and I saw the name and I went, but it's just one person. How is it a studio if it's just one person? And anyway, I started following her and I watched her journey, and she actually did, I think she did a blog post or she did an Instagram post where she explained why she had called herself a studio and how she was very proud to be a one-woman studio. And she was doing everything from branding to websites. And I went, I can do that. I can do that. Why not? And so it snowballed from there. I then literally jumped online and looked for every single piece of content, course, tutorial, whatever, to have that had anything to do with business, naming, branding, graphic design, web design. I specifically focused on web design because I was learning quite a lot on branding already in the studio environment. So I didn't want to focus too much on that. I mostly focused on how the hell do I build a business? What does that look like? How do I do finances? How does that work? How do I do an invoice? How do I make a proposal? What is this world that exists? And I spent 5 months every single night and in all my lunch breaks studying, essentially, and testing. I had a little black book, which I still have, and I was actually looking for it just now because I wanted to show you, but I couldn't find it. Where I wrote everything down. I wrote all my ideas. Back then I was actually doing positioning and niching. I just didn't know that was what I was doing. Just working out what to call myself, what services I could offer based on what I already knew. I knew I couldn't do branding on my own because I didn't know enough about the process. So I thought, okay, well, I'll start with what I do know and I'll just try and sell graphic design. I'd had that experience with the Over app. So I thought, okay, well, I can use that. That's a nice client. I'd been working with some other clients, so that was cool. And nothing clicked and nothing clicked and nothing clicked. I think it was in April, which was 2 months before I left the job.
When you say nothing clicked,
just didn't feel right.
Nothing clicked in your head, or you tried things and you got feedback that this doesn't work?
No, so nothing felt right to me. So I was trying to work out how to sell myself, but nothing was making sense. So I was like, oh, I'll call myself a digital designer. And I'm like, what's a digital designer? Who needs that? Like, why not just go and get a job? Like, this doesn't make sense. So I also think I had pregnancy brain, to be fair. So I don't think I was thinking that logically, but nothing made sense. And then I suddenly went, stop talking rubbish. I think it was about in April where my roommate connected me with her aunt who had a bad branding experience with another designer and was looking for some help to get it back on its feet. And I said, I'll do it. And I looked at it and I went, I know how to fix that. I know how to fix it. I do. I know how to make it look better. And so I worked out how to do a proposal. I made it up. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I did 3 packages because that's what they say you should do. Put ridiculous pricing on there. I mean, now I look back and I'm like, oh, cute. But it was, it made sense for the time and it made sense for where I was. And she approved the middle package. And I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Oh my God. And it was a great experience. I learned a lot. It was the first time I used a project management tool. I think I used Trello, and I made it up as I went. And it went great. She loved it. That piece is still up on my Behance portfolio if anybody is interested in going to have a look. And unfortunately, she ended up going a different way with her business, but she loved the process and we ended up becoming great friends. And she gave me a bunch of other work. Her sister came to me and I did that project, and then a family friend came, but I charged everyone. I never did any work for free, not really, at least. I did add-ons for free. So it was like they did the branding with me and then I would throw in business cards or I would throw in a PDF or something like that because I wasn't sure. I just didn't know. And I just carried on. And every time I got a client, I improved my process, changed my documents, updated my questionnaires, and pitched for every opportunity I could and did a little bit of everything and carried on. Eventually made enough money.
When you say pitched for every opportunity, wait. I want to dive into it. when you say pitched into every opportunity, it sounded like it was spreading word to mouth. But from my experience, these things usually take a lot of times. It's not like they all happen word to mouth within
No.
like a month or so. So were things rolling? Like, you're pregnant. Were you already giving birth at the middle of this,
Yeah.
or this all happened before you gave birth?
So the timeline goes, I got that client just before I quit my job. So I actually was working with her while I was still at my other job. And I finished up her project just before I finished my actual job, and then went to go and have my baby. So I left my job in the first 2 weeks of June, and she was born on the 25th. So there was a very narrow gap. I spent a bit of time at home. I moved out of that flat and back in with my parents, which was really lucky, but they were in a tiny studio apartment because obviously it was just the two of them. So having me move back home was awkward. But hey, I lived in the little loft room up at the top, and that was what it was. And after that, I didn't do any work. Right after she was born, I had a really hard time. I had a really rough birth. And then I had a really, really hard time with her for the first 3 months. So I didn't do anything except exist from day to day. It was really a horrible time. And when she was about 3 months old, things eventually started getting a bit better. And I actually approached my college and I said, I can't do much, but can I help with anything? Because I knew I'd run out of money, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to ask my parents for money. I don't like asking for money. So I was like, I need to work out how to make some money. So let me go and speak to my college so I spoke to them, and my design lecturer actually said, you can help us with our marketing. So I did work for them for about 6 months, and it was just enough to get me through. And when Riley was 4 months old, we moved out here to the bush, and everything got better after that. That's when I got my clients, her sister came to me. And when I moved out here, I started meeting more people, different people from the safari industry, photographers, all sorts of interesting people. And that's where it started. And I would pitch, but it wasn't like
How did you meet?
You should
when you say
hire
I
me.
met more
it
people?
Was a family connections. So I would say, I'm trying to remember. It was a bit of a blur, I'll be honest. I don't really remember much of the first couple of months when we moved out here because, I was a mess. I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night, I think, at most. So it was, I was in mom mode fully. But there's a whole long story, but the short story is that we met this couple who run a lodge out here, a beautiful 4-star luxury lodge, and they are the most amazing couple. And we met them through family friends. So we had dinner, but it was a family dinner. It wasn't like a formal dinner or anything like that. And I'm always listening, and I'm always paying attention to what people are saying. And they happened to be talking about their business and how they wanted to transform it and change it and blah, blah, blah. And I just snuck in that I do branding and websites. I just snuck it into the conversation. I happened to be working with another client that I knew from back then on a bit of stuff. So they were like, oh, that's very interesting. Can you show us some of your work? So I showed them a little bit of it, and they were like, that's great. That's fantastic. Congrats. Well done. And then we never spoke of it again. 2 months later, I get an email from an agency in Cape Town saying, they've got this client who wants to redo their website. We got your name from so-and-so. Would you like to pitch for the job? And I went, but I know these people. I had dinner with them. I know their business. This is weird. Why? I thought this must be some coincidence. Or they've asked to talk to me, but they've gone the professional route. So I thought, okay, well, I won't say anything. I got on a call with them, asked them some questions about the website. I'd never done a website, ever. I was like, okay, let's just do it. Why not? Did a proposal. I did a whole bunch of research. I did a quick proposal course, and then I revamped my whole proposals, put a whole thing together, pitched for it, and I got the job. Only 2 days later did she phone me, the client now. She phoned me and she's like, Rachel, I didn't know it was you. So it was a complete coincidence that I'd gotten the job, and she was like ecstatic, and she was like, this is so exciting. She commended me on my professionalism of not name dropping. So she'd said she's very proud of the fact that I didn't go, oh, well, yes, I know them and have this relationship. I was just trying to be professional, but she really valued that because I think they get a lot of that. So they get a lot of people sort of using relationship to get places, and I just didn't want to be that person. So I didn't. I kept it to myself, pitched for the job like I would any other job, and got it, and then went, oh shit, what now?
Yeah, can we talk about this for a second? Because you said, I've never done a website in my life, and I'll figure it out. But I talk with so many designers, especially early on. They are so afraid of taking on a commitment where they have not done this before, and they just feel they lack the confidence. So like, what was your thinking process about it? How did you know you can figure it out and not let them down and, take money and won't be able to deliver?
I think, so the first thing, I was very transparent. I said to them, guys, this is one of the first projects of this size. I never said to them I've never done a website, because I'd obviously done web work. I'd done it in college. I dabbled with it a little bit. I'd been studying for 6 months on all sorts of other content. I knew theoretically, but I'd never put it into practice. So I said to them, this is probably one of the first projects of this size, which is why I'm only charging you X. So I'd like to use this opportunity to learn and to give you what I know, but please understand that I'm not coming in as a complete professional. So, you need to tell me if you're comfortable with that. And I think they were both attracted to the lower price, but I think they were attracted to the thinking. So I had organically, I think I'm built this way as a person. I've always been a problem solver naturally. And so I think maybe I have an advantage in that sense, that already I'm about problem solving. This goes right back to early family days. My family has moved around. We've had to deal with ridiculous situations, but we've always problem solved. We've always thought out of the box. We've always been, carry on. What's next? Next step. Carry on moving. Don't sit and wallow. Carry on. Do it. Figure it out later. You learn best on the go. The best way to learn to swim is to be chucked into the deep end. I mean, not literally because you'll drown, but theoretically speaking. And I said to them, I know enough, and here's how I would like to shift things. I spoke to the stuff I did know, which was about communication and just being clear. Their old website was very cluttered and all of that. And I already knew that wasn't the best approach. So I said to them, this is how I want to approach it. This is what I think we should do. And do you agree? And they said yes. They then booked I think it was one of those situations where they were like, yeah, sure, you don't know what you're doing. Because I think I pitched myself quite well for not knowing what I was doing. Again, we'd been in the whole of college, we'd learned how to present, we'd learned how to communicate, we'd learned how to articulate ideas clearly. And so I was able to do that really effectively. And I almost didn't even need a portfolio to back me up, because I could speak to the problems that I could see. And, I just spent a lot of time listening. And we did a 3-day workshop in Cape Town. It was the first time I'd left my daughter, and it was terrifying, but it was great. And we did a 3-day workshop, and we had a copywriter, we had the marketing team. So I wasn't alone. I didn't manage the project by myself.
They brought in the rest of the team?
They brought in all of those people. So I was just the designer. just the designer. There was a development team as well. And I spent a lot of time asking questions and listening. And then it came time for me to present wireframes. And I went, what are wireframes? In the meeting,
They told you we're looking to see
they said,
wireframes,
yes.
and you're like,
so
oh,
Rachel, have you
so
got
next
the
week you'll be
wireframes
showing us the
ready?
meeting.
And
I'm
I
like,
went,
sure.
yeah. I was like, we were sitting there and they were like, so Rachel, do you want to talk about the wireframes? And I went,
Let me
sure.
Google that. Let me check that on Google.
I have never been so embarrassed. But that was, I actually have subsequently told my client about this and we had a little laugh about it. But I bullshitted my way out of that meeting. I cannot tell you. I went, well, guys, we're not going to do wireframes just yet because we haven't talked about the content structure and the site. I didn't know what I was saying. But I went, I don't have wireframes. I'm not ready. I don't know what these are. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And so I went, no, we're not ready for those yet. And then they were like, oh, good point. And then the copywriter came in with her content structure and I was like furiously writing things down. Went home that night, studied wireframes, whipped out wireframes, only went to bed at like 3:00 that morning. I came to the next workshop and said, right, guys, now we can talk about wireframes. It was a mess, but it was great.
Yeah. Classic
I learned
fake it
very
till
quickly.
you make it. Yeah.
I learned very quickly and the wireframes were awful and didn't make any sense, but I adjusted them, made edits. We worked on it in the workshop and the website turned out beautifully. So it was a good experience. And then it snowballed from there because then word of mouth, and then I got this client, got that client, got this client. And then I've been very lucky and since then have basically been booked solid for 3 years. So I'm very lucky.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you mentioned lucky, and I think luck plays a part in everybody's journeys. But it does seem like you've done a lot of things right and you took a lot of courageous decisions along the way.
Also made plenty of mistakes.
Can we talk about the process of raising prices? Because you've mentioned, we've heard in detail about the early days, and you've mentioned you've lured them in with low prices, and I'm just trying to learn here. What was the process of raising your prices?
I raised my prices with every new client.
How are you thinking about that?
I wasn't. I'm being honest. I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't find any information out there that spoke about how to price projects, what these things cost. All I know is that I had the reference from my agency job and what she charged. And I went, there's no way I'm ever going to get there. There's just no way. I don't know how to charge that much money. Why? What? What do you need to have in order to validate that pricing? I knew that you needed a good process. I knew that you needed a solid client experience. And that was instinctive, I think. I likened it to the service industry. So this is where my waitressing came in. And I went, okay, what's the difference between a quick pavement coffee shop and a 5-star restaurant? And I instinctively created the parallels between the experience you get here or should get and the experience you get here, and also likened it instinctively to the people and went, okay, the person who's going to want to dash into a sidewalk coffee shop for a cappuccino is not necessarily the same person who goes to the 5-star restaurant. They could be, however, but their needs are different. And so I worked out first where I wanted to be. Did I want to be a 5-star restaurant, or was I quite happy being the cappuccino shop on the corner? And for the first little while, I was very happy being the cappuccino shop on the corner because I knew that I didn't then need to lose my mind over this high value experience. I could just do the basics really well. And I was happy there. I was making enough money. I mean, I wasn't making enough money. I was just getting by. my parents thankfully didn't make me pay rent or anything like that. So my expenses were fairly low, comparatively speaking. So I was making enough money to sort of live and have everything I needed for my daughter and I. I wasn't interested in raising my prices until I realized the clients that were coming to me were higher value clients. And they wanted solutions that required bigger thinking. So bigger website jobs or branding that wasn't just, not that they're less important, but it wasn't just a photographer who was part-time. This was a business now. This was a safari camp that needed to book more clients and needed to redo their entire camp. They were renovating. They needed this brand to represent them and they needed to be out there. And I went, my little coffee shop on the corner is not really cutting it. And I kind of try to equate it to hours. So I kind of did, okay, so I spend about 6 hours on this. I spend about 5 hours on that. That takes me about 12 hours. There's about 2 hours of meetings and feedback. So according to my hourly rate, which you can get from just knowing the industry, there's standards with that. So I used that and went, okay, there's the number. Right. I need to make at least this much in order for this to make sense. And then I did a stupid thing and charged under. I don't know why. But I went, that looks like too much money. So I charged under. I don't know why. But I did that for a short while. But actually, I don't regret it because what I did was I built a reputation for delivering a high quality service for affordable rates, not cheap rates, affordable. So I then started gaining a reputation for the type of experience I delivered. So people were saying, well, she's very clear, she's well articulated, she helped me understand my business. And that happened organically. I then realized I needed to charge for that. It sort of dawned on me when I started watching YouTube channels. And I then sort of discovered you. I discovered The Future and a couple of other guys on YouTube. And I started watching these videos going, okay, I need to take myself and what I'm doing more seriously. And I started charging for my brand strategy. I started charging for my workshops. I doubled my pricing for branding and booked 3 clients in one go at that high rate. And I nearly lost my mind. I came home and I was like, what is happening? But I did 3 things. I changed the way I did my proposals. I insisted on a call or a meeting before any proposals got sent so that I could understand what they needed, where they were in their business, and how I could help. I then translated that into a 32-page proposal.
Oh,
believe
wow.
it or not. Yeah. Which had case studies, it had goals and objectives, it had how we're going to solve this problem, the tools that I use, what my process looks like, what the timeline looks like. Sometimes it had a little bit of information on like legal bits if I was dealing with a client that was particularly finicky. Put everything in that proposal, and most of the time I only pitched one package. So, and then you could add on. So it was not package A, B, or C because I went, this is what you need. This is what you need. I can't, offering you less doesn't make sense. So I'll give you the gold and then you can turn that into platinum if you really want to. And that worked really, really well. And so I booked those 3 clients. And then what I made
How long did it
to
take
have,
you to, how long did it take you to create one of these proposals?
2 days.
2 days per proposal.
Yeah.
So it's like a week to send 3 proposals.
Yeah. I took that expense on and I decided that that was the way I wanted to do business. And up until recently, just because I think they weren't the right fit for me, up until recently, every proposal I sent signed the client, quite literally. Every proposal I sent, I signed the client. There was only one
Did you ever get
proposal that I
rejects
sent.
on your
Only one.
prices?
No, never. I have never had anybody question me on my pricing. I have had one client say to me, this is out of my budget. What can we do? And I said, no problem. We'll reduce the scope. So this is what I can do for that price. Are you happy? And then she said, yes, let's go. So we just cut it down. We did a full branding thing, and then we only did, I think, 3 pages for her website instead of like the full thing. But that she ended up coming back to me 6 months later to add on those extra pages when she had a bit more budget, because she was able to raise her prices and book more clients. And so she ended up with more capital, and she came back and we expanded on her website. And I've subsequently done a bunch of stuff for her. We've done service guides, we've done pricing pamphlets, we've done all sorts. So I worked very hard to not up my pricing without feeling like I was delivering the luxury experience that came with that pricing. But at the same time, I did get a client come in who I really wanted to help, but I knew she couldn't afford me. It was just not going to happen. And so I sat down with her and I said, this is what this costs usually. However, I really believe in your work. I want to help. So where is your budget and what can we do? And then she said, this is how much money I have. I said, okay, fine. Well, how about we do this and we do a barter agreement? So you give me X and I will give you Y, and we'll put it in a contract, and then, there you go. So I've always been, it really genuinely, I can say this honestly, was never about the money for me. It was always about empowering that business to do better, because that's what made me happy. And the money thing, I think that's maybe why I was as successful, because I think my clients could tell that it was about solving the problem and it wasn't about how much money I could get out of them. And yes, I had processes in place and contracts and all of that stuff that you're supposed to have, but I never needed to use them. I've only had one client who took too long to pay me. But there was a problem there, so on her side, and it was solved, and she eventually did pay me. But I've been very careful to nurture relationship first, so that when it came to payment, there weren't any issues. And I don't know whether it was the relationship that I built with clients or whether they were just nice people. I think they were just nice people as well. But even with bigger clients that I've had less of a relationship with, I've never had problems with payments, because I was always careful to not make it about the money. And so every time I've increased my pricing, I've made sure that I've increased the experience that they get with that. So they either get me one-on-one. So it's proposals, process, quality of experience. So I would say, for example, it's just the quality of the experience. It's tough to explain. I was trying to actually explain this to a friend of mine the other day, but it's the way I communicate with them. It's like when you go to an Airbnb and you just have a host that takes care of you. They check in.
But
they make sure you've got everything they need.
Do you meet them physically in a cafe or in your office, or are these remote clients sometimes? Yeah.
So while I was working here in this area, most of my clients were here, so I could meet them in person. So that was always what we did, either at their office. I don't have an office, so we were at coffee shops or whatever while that was still allowed. And then when that stopped happening, it was just on a call. Whether it was a WhatsApp call, a Zoom call, it was always just talking face to face to connect first. And I think that really helped. I think that really made them feel safe, because I think I had a natural understanding that this was a lot of money and it's scary to invest that much money in your business. And I knew that. And I didn't want them to feel like I was coming in just to take their money. I actually wanted to help. And I think for every single client, I've over-delivered. I have. But I also think that that's just who I am as a person. but I don't regret it, because what I gave them in connection and in relationship and in trust has repaid itself over and over again, because they have referred me. My business is 85% referral. I've only just started getting like direct inquiries from around the world based on Instagram and stuff like that. But up until this point, it's been full-blown referral. I haven't even had to pitch for work. Genuinely, I haven't had to. I have never sent a cold email. I've never done any of that, because I think what I've been really, really, really focused on is building those relationships. And the experience when somebody's working with me, it's laying out the boundaries very clear up front, helping them understand what the process looks like, when what is going to happen, making sure that I do the best I can to deliver when I say I'm going to make sure that they feel heard, that I give them guidelines on what feedback to give, so that it's not just, here you go. I've used my presentation skills from college to present the work every time, not just the first time, every revision. I now use Loom because we can't always find times to talk. So I now use Loom to present the work. I do a full walkthrough. I explain the concept. I explain the reasoning behind my decisions. So it's really a luxury experience, and it requires a lot of time from me. But that's why they pay me what they do. And that's why they get what they get, and why they're happy at the end of it. And they go, wow, that was transformative. That was very cool. And they speak a lot about clarity. So I think a lot of that comes into my work as well. And then it's just the handing off. I feel like a lot of designers don't get this part right. It's a recent thing for me, but I now do a goodbye package. And it's like a little bit of a PDF about what we did together and what we achieved and how you can get hold of me. And here's your special loyalty pricing. So I give them loyalty pricing. If you've been my client before, then you get, I think it's like 15% off any other service going forward. And you also get a referral thing. So if you refer me to somebody else and they book me, you get X off of further work. So I've tried to I go, okay, well, that's clearly working. So let me leverage that. Amazing. Yeah, let me leverage that. So that's worked a couple of times. Not every client gets it, and I can't really tell you why. So look, my process has got holes. It still could use some work. I still miss deadlines. I still have to say to clients, look, we're going to have to move this to next week. I'm still a mother first, and that takes priority always. And so a lot of the time I have to flip everything on its head because she needs me, she's sick, she can't go to school, it's whatever it is. But I try and build that in. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about communication. And if a client wants to WhatsApp me, they can WhatsApp me. That's just what I've decided to do, because I would rather my client feel like I'm literally their pocket cheerleader, there for them through everything. I mean, I have hours, so if they message me at 9 p.m. at night, I'm not going to reply. They know that I'll only hear from them. And most of the time, they're very apologetic, and they're like, "Sorry for messaging you. I just had a thought." And I'm like, "No problem, no problem." It's my job as the designer to decide what I'm comfortable with. There's no point getting offended with somebody messaging me at 9 p.m. Just don't answer them. Message them back tomorrow morning. It's fine, And I think that's a big part of it as well, is never getting offended by anything that a client does or says. If they ask a stupid question, it's not a stupid question. They just don't understand. So educate them. I've spent the equivalent of 3 days walking a client through the branding process because they just didn't understand it. And they eventually didn't even book with me. They decided to go a different route because they realized their business idea was nowhere near what it needed to be. But I consider that a success, because it would have been impossible to go through an identity journey with them with a faulty business idea. So I consider that a success. That time that I invested was worth it. And
yeah, and you did provide them value because you've consulted with them.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't charge them for it, but I didn't charge them for it. But hey, they did get me another client though. They referred me to somebody else who did book. So that was completely a success in my mind. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it, but I think I've just really tried to get the basics right in terms of just client experience through all the work.
Amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think you did so many things right, and I think you've shared a lot of valuable tips and insights for a lot of people to pick up along their journey. Any final kind of like tips for people starting out that you'd like to share?
Say yes to as much as possible. I think where there is value in knowing what you want to do, there is also value in learning. And right in the beginning, especially right in the beginning, the more experience you have just working with clients is going to get you in the door. You don't have to do it forever. You can do it for 3 months. You can do it for 6 months, but just say yes. And I mean, within reason, people, let's be logical. But my biggest advice is saying yes, because that's what I did. And it worked for me. It got me connections. It got me experience. I made mistakes. I got things wrong. I got things right. And it was basically very messy, but it all works out in the end.
Fantastic. And I hope we'll see you a lot more here on the channel. Thank you so much for sharing.
We'll see. I'm excited.
Thanks,
Ran.